Greetings, friends. You're on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we'll discuss the situation in Ukraine as of March 27th, 2025. A tremendous number of events have unfolded today, so let's get started. We'll begin with the Sumy region. Today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made several very important statements. He believes that the armed forces of the Russian Federation will soon launch a new offensive, which will take place in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. In principle, this is not surprising. In reality, the Russian army is planning to advance in this sector not because it is the most promising, or because an attack on the Sumy region could lead to some kind of swift, lightning-fast defeat of the Ukrainian army. The Russian side has only one goal in this potential offensive: to create a security zone and prevent further incursions by Ukrainian units into the territory of the Russian Federation. Let me remind you that up until March 2025, the Ukrainian side held only one bridgehead on Russian territory, the Sudzha district and the town of Sudzha. But we can see that by the end of March, possibly in the first 2 weeks of April or the first 10 days of April, Ukrainian units will be completely pushed out of Sudzha and the Sudzha district. After that, the Russian side will have only one small remaining area where Ukrainian units are present: the Belgorod region, to be more precise, the Krasnoyaruzhsky district, where Ukrainian forces have already advanced in March. In fact, after the successful completion of the operation involving the gas transportation system, the first reports began to emerge that the Russian army, following this success and with very minimal losses on its side, has started redeploying units back to the South Donetsk direction: Pokrovsk, Toretsk, Chasiv Yar, and the Siversk axis. Overall, after the conclusion of the Sudzha battle, the Russian army planned to wrap up a number of ongoing battles that have been raging since 2022. These include the fighting for Pokrovsk, further attacks toward Huliaipol, the final stages of the Toretsk operation, and the complete clearing of Chasiv Yar. In other words, there's still a lot of work on the old front lines, and of course, they need personnel, assault troops, equipment, aviation, artillery, and so on. Zelensky and the Ukrainian command fully understood this situation, which is why, at the moment when the Russian army was close to finishing the clearing of the Sudzha district, the Ukrainian side launched attacks toward the settlements of Demidovka and Popovka. As a result of these strikes, which began just a few days ago, the Ukrainian side has apparently managed to take control of part of Demidovka. At the very least, we've seen objective control footage confirming the presence of Ukrainian units in this small village. There is also a considerable amount of evidence from various neutral and pro-Ukrainian cartographers and resources indicating that Ukrainian forces managed to advance close to the settlement of Popovka. However, during recent assaults, all attempts by the Ukrainian army were repelled. Today, for example, additional objective control footage has emerged from this sector. Currently, the Ukrainian side is heavily focused on striking logistics. In this short, 6-second video, we can see strikes on 2 bridges. One bridge was completely destroyed in the settlement of Grafovka, while the other was taken out in Nadezhdevka. Essentially, this means that the villages of Demidovka and Popovka are supplied through Grafovka and Nadezhdevka. Of course, there are many low-quality rural roads, but if we're talking about paved or dirt roads, the 2 main routes run through Nadezhdevka and Grafovka, and both bridges have been destroyed. So we can see that the Ukrainian side has no intention of advancing further to seize another small bridgehead on Russian territory. Doing so would force the Russian military command to spend another month or 2 clearing Ukrainian formations from this sector, which would, of course, buy Zelensky more time and maintain the image of Ukrainian units operating on Russian soil. Therefore, it's clear that the Russian army is quickly and urgently finalizing its regrouping and halting all redeployments of units from Kursk Oblast towards, say, Donetsk or Zaporizhzhia. Everyone is staying put, and soon an offensive will begin to establish this security zone. It's hard to say whether the Russian army will push all the way to the city of Sumy, but at this point it's a matter of how things play out. If the offensive progresses successfully, why not advance all the way to Sumy? The situation could develop in any direction. As for the current situation along the line of contact, the Russian army is finishing the clearing of the Sudzha district in Kursk Oblast. Today, additional objective control footage was published, showing Russian soldiers raising their flag over the Sudzha border checkpoint, specifically on the roof of the checkpoint building. There's no doubt now. Just a second ago, another video surfaced, confirming the presence of Russian units, not just a single photo. That settles it. The armed forces of the Russian Federation have taken full control of the Sudzha border crossing. Yes, there is still one small pocket of Ukrainian resistance in this sector, southwest of Sudzha, between the villages of Gogolevka and Oleshnya. But at this very moment, right now, it's possible that Russian forward units have already launched another attempt, or perhaps their first assault on these villages. As of now, likely during the night of March 27th to 28th, 2025, Ukrainian forces, to avoid encirclement, will be forced to retreat toward the settlements of Yunakievka and Lokhnya. Judging by the current map configuration, which you can see on your screens, it's very hard to imagine how Ukrainian troops plan to hold this pocket. Most likely, a withdrawal will begin tonight. Let's compare the maps. Just yesterday, the situation in the Sudzha sector looked like this. A large number of open fields with a pocket between Novaya Basovka, Gogolevka, and Rubanshchina. The state border was in a kind of limbo, either under Russian control or no one's control. But today, with the release of footage showing Russian soldiers at the Sudzha checkpoint itself, all doubts have been erased. The front line is now clearly defined. And of course, after the fall of this border crossing, we should expect Russian units to keep advancing. At the very least, their immediate objective will be to establish a security zone, with the minimal target being the small village of Yunakievka, a position where they can station troops, and from there, control the vast forested area between the city of Sumy and the state border. This massive forest is undoubtedly packed with Ukrainian forces. There are also reports that Russian forward units have entered the northern part of the village of Guyeva. However, no objective control footage has been published yet to confirm this. So far, only two sources have circulated this information. The Telegram channel of the Northern Grouping, which stated that Ukrainian units were pushed out of the northern part, though it didn't specify whether Russian troops had moved in. Some independent cartographers marked northern Guyeva as under Russian control. Here, too, we can see that combat operations are nearing their conclusion. Essentially, only one major village remains in Kursk Oblast, where Russian troops have not yet advanced, Gornal. This will likely be their final objective in the region. After that, the focus will shift to crossing the state border and initiating combat operations for the villages between Sumy and Sudzha. Belgorod direction. Today, reports emerged throughout the day that Ukrainian units have resumed their attacks. Several reliable sources posted updates indicating that Ukrainian forces made multiple infantry-led assaults without heavy equipment, using ATVs and motorcycles, in an attempt to break through Russian defenses near Demidovka and Popovka. However, all these attacks were repelled by the Russian armed forces. Kupiansk direction, significant frontline movement. The most intense developments today are coming from the southern Kupiansk, Lyman sector. Pro-Ukrainian sources and neutral cartographers are reporting that the Ukrainian front in this area has either collapsed or is on the verge of collapsing. For the first time in a long while, pro-Ukrainian mapping services have officially acknowledged the loss of the village of Terny. Geolocation evidence had already suggested this, but now it's confirmed. Additionally, recent geolocated footage from Yampolivka indicates that, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the village is either partially in the grey zone or still under partial Ukrainian control. Redkodub direction, major Ukrainian withdrawals. Today we're seeing a massive shift in mapping data. Pro-Ukrainian and neutral cartographers have made significant adjustments to their frontline markings. As of yesterday, March 26, 2025, Russian forces were facing a heavily fortified network of Ukrainian strongholds around Katerinivka, Nova, Lipova, Redkodub, and Novomikhailivka. But today, pro-Ukrainian cartographers have for the first time made a major revision, showing that Russian forces have penetrated between Ukrainian strongpoints to the west and east. They've also marked a grey zone extending all the way to the first buildings of Katerinivka itself. Ukrainian sources report Russian advances. Near Katerinivka, Ukrainian sources claim that over the past few days, Russian forces have managed to enter some barracks and possibly farm buildings in the small village of Katerinivka. Shortly after, neutral cartographers updated the frontline maps in this sector, marking several tree lines and fields as under Russian control. Just before the preparation of this video, another piece of footage was published by the 60th Mechanized Brigade, showing Russian assault troops moving through a Ukrainian company strongpoint near the villages of Lipov and Nova. Based on this footage, we have updated the map to reflect Russian control in this area. Russian forces pushing northwest toward Novyi Mir. We can now see significant progress in this sector. It appears the Russian army will continue advancing in a northwestern direction, likely until they reach Novyi Mir. After that, the front line will stabilize along the Novyi Mir, Kharkivka, Novosadov line. Once these advances are consolidated, Russian forces will be able to push further west toward the Oskil River, attempting to bypass the village of Borova from the south. Borova is a key strategic objective for the Russian army in this sector. Additionally, from Redkodub, Russian troops will likely advance toward Drobyshev and Lyman, potentially triggering the third battle for Lyman, which we have long anticipated. Toretsk sector. No major changes, but heavy fighting continues. Over the past 24 hours, the map in the Toretsk direction has remained unchanged, though combat persists. Russian aviation and artillery are actively striking Ukrainian positions near Alexandropil, Bila Hora, Ivanopilia, Kleban Bek, Katerinivka. Russian forces are systematically degrading Ukrainian defenses in this pocket, but no major advances have been reported yet. Breakthrough near Panteleimonka. The most significant movement has been observed south of Valentinivka, near the village of Panteleimonka. Reports indicate that Russian forces have now fully secured this small settlement. Pokrovsk direction, the battle for logistics. Ukrainian forces understand that a large-scale battle for Kostiantynivka, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk is imminent. However, fighting in this sector without proper logistics and supply lines will be extremely difficult. To restore Ukrainian positions near Kostiantynivka, they first need to regain control of the railway section between Udakhne and Kotlin. But this has been an unsolvable puzzle for months. All Ukrainian attempts have failed so far. Recent developments near Pokrovsk. In February and March, Ukrainian forces repeatedly counterattacked from Pokrovsk toward Pashana and Shevchenko, briefly forcing Russian troops to retreat from both villages. By early March, Russia held only 15 to 20% of Pashana and Shevchenko. However, after wrapping up operations in the Sudzha district, Russia redeployed reserves to this sector, stabilizing the front line. As of March 27th, pro-Ukrainian sources admit that Russian forces have fully retaken Pashana and Shevchenko and are now pushing along the railway toward Pokrovsk. Ukrainian counterattacks near Kotlin and Uspanivka. Seeing their offensive potential exhausted in the south, Ukrainian forces shifted their focus northward. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources, including Deep State, reported that Ukrainian troops have partially regained control of Kotlin. We have marked this area as disputed or under the fog of war. Additionally, fierce fighting has been reported near Uspanivka and Solon. Ukrainian forces have reportedly taken at least 40% of Solon, indicating progress in their effort to cut off the Russian salient. What's next? Ukraine will likely attempt new attacks from Pokrovsk toward Pashana and Shevchenko to weaken Russian defenses near Udakhne Kotlin and south of Vovche. If successful, Russia may be forced to retreat toward Novotroitsk, but only if the situation becomes untenable. Russian counterattacks are expected in response. The fate of Kostiantynivka, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk hangs in the balance. One thing is clear. The fate of Kostiantynivka, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk hinges on the Udakhne-Pokrovsk salient. The longer Russian forces hold this bridgehead, the worse the situation becomes for Ukrainian troops near Toretsk, southern Kostiantynivka, and Siversk. This small but critical sector is the decisive battleground of 2025. Russia's ability to maintain control here eases pressure on other fronts, allowing its forces to operate more freely elsewhere. Russian breakthrough near Novoalexandrivka reports indicate that Russian forces broke through Ukrainian defenses south of Uspanivka and entered Novoalexandrivka. while unconfirmed, pro-Russian sources claim partial control of the village as of March 27th. If true, this would relieve pressure on Russia's eastern flank, making Ukrainian counterattacks more difficult. Eventually, Ukraine may be forced to withdraw from Solon and Uspanivka toward Novosohivka. This maneuver could stabilize the Udakne-Kotlin salient and prevent its collapse. Dnipro direction. Russian offensive resumes after long pause.